My name is Lucas, starts with L as in like, ends with S as in subscribe, and this week I'm celebrating 10,000 subscribers here on the channel, and at the same time I'm celebrating 100 days since I got my very first 3D printer. So as a thank you, I wanted to share my top 100 things that I have learned during my first 100 days 3D printing, but I quickly realized that this video would be way too long, so I decided to split it up into two parts, with the second part being released once this channel hit 20,000 subscribers. So without further ado, please do subscribe for more 3D printing tips and tutorials, and let's start the counter and my top 50 things that I have learned during my first 100 days 3D printing. You can download free models online, for example from Maker World and Printables. If possible, try to download the 3MF files. This way the color information is already included. STL files work just as well for printing, but they only have the dimensions of the print and not all the information required to make the print look great. The general filament I recommend you to start with to learn just 3D printing in general is PLA, and then you can go over to some more advanced filaments later, such as PETG, ABS or ASA. Filaments from other brands will work just as well with your printer, but if you are using RFID tags, which I personally highly recommend by the way, if for example you're using Bambu Lab RFID tags on Bambu Lab printers or Anycubic RFID tags with Anycubic printers, then the RFID tags will automatically tell the printer which material and which color you're using, which will not only save you time, but most likely also save you from accidentally printing something using the wrong color. Although a lot of advanced YouTube videos will talk about different temperatures and speed settings, most of the time you don't need to worry about this at all, since all the settings are actually already included in the files when you are downloading these from different websites, and you also have presets in the slicing software that automatically will handle the temperature for you depending on the filament or the material you're using. An AMS or an AMS Lite or a CFS or an ACE, depending on the brand you're using, is a multi-spool hub that allows you to create automatic multicolor prints or automatically change from one spool to another if you're running out of filament in the middle of a print. In addition to PLA, another material you can print with open printers such as the Bambu Lab A1 or A1 Mini is PETG. It is overall considered a better material than PLA, especially if you have some constant pressure on the print. For example, if you're building a shelf or a top mount for your AMS Lite. However, PETG should be dried in a specific filament dryer or in an enclosed printer before printing. A lot of people online are talking about glue sticks and that you need that to either make the print adhere to the plate or to prevent the plate from sticking too well to the print. If you're just starting out using only PLA or PETG, especially if you're using a Bambu Lab printer, you don't need to worry about glue at all because the included PEI plate is absolutely amazing without any glue at all. Speaking about the plates, if you want, you can buy extra plates that have some different functions. For example, a smooth plate that gives the bottom layer a smooth texture, or a cool plate either by Bambu Lab or any third-party company such as BQ. And these cool plates do not need to be heated up by the printer and also provides even better grip, which is particularly great for taller prints on the Bambu Lab A1. When it comes to storing filament, especially PETG or other filament that needs heated drying before printing, you should also store the filament in a sealed container or a dedicated dry box when you're not using them. In comparison, if you have them installed on the AMS Lite, they will continue to collect moisture from the surrounding air, and you might need to dry the filament again before next time you print. And speaking about storing filament long term, if you have opened the packaging, you should also include some desiccant or silica gel in the storage box or container. I personally use these color changing ones, which also can be dried themselves, so you can actually reuse these silica gels whenever they're wet. And although they do change colors themselves, I still recommend adding a hygrometer in the box so you can see the exact humidity right away. Bambu Lab recommends keeping this below 20% humidity, but my electric dry box keeps it around 30%, and I haven't had any single issues with any of my PLA, PETG, ABS or ASA. In Bambu Studio, which is the slicer software you can use to send prints to the actual printer, you can adjust the size, color and even material of the item before printing. And if you want to learn the basics and best shortcuts in Bambu Studio, I highly recommend checking out my Bambu Studio for Beginners video, which you have linked down in the description, where you also have links to all the other products I'm talking about in this video, as well as a link to my Maker World profile, where you can see all the previous items I've printed or talked about on this channel. Spoiler alert, the best shortcuts in Bambu Studio are R, S and A for rotation, scale and arrange. Since all prints are being printed from the bottom up, sometimes you do need to add support to your prints so everything can be held up properly while it's still being printed. Usually the automatic support in Bambu Studio is more than enough, but you can also add this manually if you want. You can also replace the nozzle of your printer. The default size which is included with your at least Bambu lab printer is 0.4 millimeter, but you can change this to 0.2 for much finer prints, which is almost a must if you ever want to print small text on a print, but you can also go up in size to 0.6 millimeter or even 0.8 to speed up some larger prints if you don't care too much about the overall detail and quality. You can also both print and buy a lot of cool upgrades and accessories for your Bambu Lab A1. For example, this 3D printed shelf if you want to increase the height of your Bambu Lab A1 while also get some extra storage underneath. Or this super cute Knomi assistant who gives you detailed progress reports about the printing percentage. One accessory though that is almost a must to have is a large waste bin for your printer, especially if you are printing with multiple colors, since the printer is wasting a lot of filament in between the different color changes to prevent discolored filament to end up in the actual print. Okay, I now realize how unnecessary that was. I just did it for dramatic effect, so I hope you appreciate it and do like and subscribe to this channel. But if you're only printing single color prints, you also have a very small and minimalistic waste bin that is also linked in my Maker World profile. The most common issue for failed prints is a dirty plate, since these plates do need to be cleaned regularly with soap and water. But between you and me, standard disinfecting alcohol, especially IPA, works great most of the time and is a huge time saver if you are printing, for example, in a spare bedroom without running water and soap. Once you've downloaded your first prints and printed out all the necessary accessories for your own printer, you might want to look into designing some prints of your own. In that case, I highly recommend to start with Tinkercad to learn some basic 3D design before getting into some more serious softwares like Plasticity and Fusion 360. And if you want to print something but don't have your own 3D printer yet, or if you want to print something in a material your printer does not support, then I highly recommend to check out the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. Using PCBWay is super simple. All you have to do is to upload the STL or the file that you want to print to the website, then you get to choose any kind of material and the color that you want, and then PCBWay's engineers will actually look through the file just to make sure that there are no issues before they actually start printing. And right now, PCBWay is actually celebrating their 11th anniversary and 11 years of unstoppable progress, with not only lucky draws, but also tons of coupons on their website as well. And if you do click my personal link down in the description, you will also get $5 off your first order from PCBWay. And if you have not started your own 3D printing journey yet, and maybe you're still choosing between a Bambu Lab A1 or the smaller Bambu Lab A1 Mini, then you should know that most larger items that you want to print most likely will have a mini specific profile, which means that all these prints have been split up into separate parts, so it's a little bit more work, it takes a little bit longer time to print, but it's still possible even with the smaller A1 Mini. With that said, I do highly recommend to go with the larger A1 if the space and budget allows, since this is the standard size for all the other Bambu Lab printers as well, which means that most prints on Maker World and on the other websites as well have been designed with this larger 256mm plate in mind. And if you are still looking around to decide which printer to buy, you might be confused between CoreXY and BedSlinger printers, whatever that is. Basically, a BedSlinger means that the heat bed and the plate are moving along the Y-axis, while the print head and nozzle are moving along the X and Z axis, or Z-axis. If you compare this to a CoreXY printer, then the print head and nozzle is moving in both the X and Y axis, while the bed is moving down the Z-axis, or Z-axis, which in general provides a better, faster, and maybe most importantly, a more secure printing experience, especially if you are printing larger or taller prints. Spaghetti detection is also a term that might throw you off in the beginning, but that is when a print has failed for whatever reason, most likely due to a dirty plate, so the print isn't sticking well enough to the base plate, then the printer will continue to just spit out filament in the air because the rest of the print has either disappeared or just fallen down on the plate. But with this spaghetti detection, which for example the Bambu Lab X1C or the Anycubic Cobra S1 has, the printer will recognize that something isn't quite right and will pause the print, so you don't waste any more filament, or worst case scenario, wake up the next morning with a complete spaghetti monster and maybe even kilograms of wasted filament in your printer. And speaking about saving money, if you want to save some money but still want to get some multicolor prints, then you can pause the printer at a specific layer height and then replace the color or your filament manually. This way you can still get multicolor prints without an AMS, but you should know that this only works on a layer by layer basis. So you cannot have two or more colors on the same layer if you are changing the filament manually. Or if you're feeling extra fancy, you can look into multicolor filaments, just like this one from Sunlu. So instead of you changing the color, the filament itself will actually change color for you. I personally think that this looks super cool, plus it's also a lot faster to print since the printer doesn't need to spend time changing the filament. Sunlu was kind enough to send me over all these filaments just so I can continue making videos just like this one. Sunlu also wants you to know that if you're planning on filling up your filament stock, then you can do so during their 12th anniversary sale coming up in July, with apparently also an AMS heater pre-sale on July 6th. More information on their website or here on the channel. Although most filaments from other brands will work on your printer, it may not physically fit in your AMS or on your AMS light, but most likely you can also print adapters for each specific filament brand. And you can even print your own filament spools and spool rewinders, so you can move filament from one spool to another so it fits in your AMS or on your AMS light without any issues. If you didn't know, then this is a Beni, which was originally made to test and calibrate your printer to see which area and what type of prints is worse than others. However, nowadays almost every single new printer can handle this Beni model without any issues, but I personally think it is still a good tradition to use a Beni as your first print just to make sure that everything works as it should. And bonus fact, Beni is Swedish, if you didn't know, just like this guy, if you didn't know. In addition to Bambu Studio on your computer, you can also use the handy app to search for interesting things to print. And if you want to reprint something you've already printed, you can do that directly from the printer. Print infill is what's being filled in on the inside of your print, the internal structure of your print, if you will. In Bambu Studio, the default pattern is the grid pattern, but most people will recommend you to change this to gyroid. And with this infill pattern, the nozzle never crosses its own path on the same layer, which greatly reduces the risk of the nozzle accidentally hitting the print and knocking it over. If you're having an issue with multicolor prints bleeding into each other, you want to adjust the flushing volume. In most cases, the default values will work perfectly fine, so all you have to do is to just recalculate if you ever have any issues. However, if you feel like you're wasting too much filament between each color change, this is also where you can lower the flushed amount between each color change. When manually coloring prints in the slicer, there are a lot of different tools you can use to speed things up, including the number shortcuts for the AMS location to quickly toggle between color 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can purchase refill filament without having to purchase a new spool, which will save you a few dollars each order. I personally think that it's good to have some spare parts for your printer, especially an extra 0.2mm nozzle if you tend to use that a lot, since it's very easy for the 0.2mm specifically to get clogged, and sometimes it's just not worth the trouble trying to fix it compared to just getting a new one. Speaking of which, if you ever find yourself accidentally drop a spool or just screw up when you are putting this refill filament on a reusable spool, it's almost never worth the time and energy trying to save it. Just take the loss and remember to never do it again. Whenever you're using supports for your prints, although normal supports normally work, 3 supports should be the new default, as this most likely will save you some filament, especially on larger prints, without sacrificing any of the actual supports. Plus, it's also generally easier to remove the 3 support compared to the normal support without ruining your actual print. The most important layer of your print is the first layer, so always check your first layer to make sure that it looks good without any holes or uneven areas. And if you see something that is not 100% correct, I highly recommend to try washing the plate, restarting the print, and to just do it all over again as early as possible so you don't have to waste time, filament, and money. Please do pay attention to the warning messages in Bambu Studio. If Bambu Studio tries to warn you, you should listen. If you are designing something on your own, always do small test prints and check each part individually. It's much better to waste a few minutes of printing at a time instead of realizing you need to reprint a 24-hour-long print simply because one single part was failing. Please don't overthink everything before you start printing. Most of the time, things are surprisingly easy nowadays, and if something would end up failing, most answers are already available on either Reddit, Bambu's wiki page, or maybe here on the channel. You can never have too much filament. Try to order just as many different spools and different colors as possible, because you never know when you need both blue and cyan in the same print in order to make the perfect stitch keychain. If you start to feel like PLA or PETG is starting to become a little too basic and you want to make some more advanced prints, you can even print your own shoes in, for example, TPU, or you can even purchase your own 3D printed shoes from BQ. If you want to save some time while printing, you can print multiple items at the same time. You can simply download the STLs or the 3MF files and drag them into an already open project instead of opening them in a Bambu Studio directly and print them out one by one. Some of the most useful tools for 3D printing are clippers or cutters, as well as caliper, some M3 screws, a screwdriver with adjustable speeds, specifically important if you want to use it to re-spool some filament, a collection of various magnets, and skateboard bearings, or 608 bearings I believe they're also called, which is also almost a must if you want to have your own spinnable spool stands. But of course you have all the possible links to all the products I'm using myself down in the description below. And if you've never seen my videos before, then very recently I made a video talking about my top 6 secret Bambu Studio features, which are STL quick access shortcuts, how to skip objects using the handy app, modify STLs directly in Bambu Studio, how to activate labels in Bambu Studio, how to change filament sequence for your first and all other layers during a print, and how to master the paint on supports. And last but not least, if you don't feel like these tips and tricks are enough, then my last advice is to subscribe to this channel so you can see when I release more videos just like this one to teach you as much as possible and literally everything that I know about 3D printing. Thank you all so much for watching this part 1 of the top 100 things that I learned during my 100 first days of 3D printing. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Lucas. It starts with L as in like, ends with S as in subscribe. Please do both, and see you all in the next one. And for those of you who are still here and realize that I actually only mentioned 49 things instead of 50, well, my actual last advice is to stop watching this video and start printing yourself. Because although I hope that I can teach you everything that I know about 3D printing, I personally learned the most when I tried out things for myself, either going through new settings in Bambu Studio or failing the same print over and over again 7 times before I found the perfect combination between temperature and a cool plate in order to get my final ABS desiccant gel spool holder thing working in my printer. Because there's absolutely no more satisfying feeling than to seeing a finished print on the printer, knowing that you have made everything more or less yourself without giving any credit to the people who actually design all of this. It very much feels like it is my creation made in my apartment in my printer. But actually one thing that might be even more satisfactory is if you do click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and also like this video and give me some encouraging comments letting me know that you actually watched all these 50 top advices and looking forward to the next one. It really helps me to know what kind of videos I should be making moving forward, and also it gives me some encouragement since I'm now sitting up editing this at 3 a.m. But yeah, again, thank you all so much for watching.